Let's dig into now the history of whether tax cuts help the economy. Donald Trump's tax plan, just released. It's a disaster, as we've discussed. He wants to cut corporate taxes from 35 to 15%, cut individual tax rates, get rid of the alternative minimum tax, get rid of the estate tax, so many other things. I recently talked about how if you are a committed right-winger and you're confused about economics and you think that tax cuts help the economy, then studies that show otherwise probably won't change your mind. But all I can do is present you with the facts. So let's give it a shot, okay? As you can see in this first image, if you're watching on YouTube or on Free Speech TV or on our TV stations with us right now, in 1990, George H.W. Bush raised taxes and GDP growth increased drastically over the next 5 years. In 1993, Bill Clinton further raised the top marginal tax rate, and GDP growth again increased over the next 5 years. In 2001, George W. Bush cut taxes, and we saw small rise, small dip, small rise, small dip in GDP growth rates. When George W. Bush in 2003 cut tax rates even more, GDP growth tanked, plummeted to a low that we hadn't seen in a long time. GDP growth hit almost zero. This was the beginning of the Great Recession. Now, this isn't evidence that cutting taxes helps GDP growth or that raising taxes hurts GDP growth, but it does allow us to deduce that tax cuts don't, in a sort of vacuum, in a general sense, help economic growth. And there are, of course, many, many factors in an economy that impact GDP. But what history shows us, and it follows basic logic, is that cutting taxes is not nearly a surefire way of improving the economy. This was confirmed by one of the most comprehensive studies that we've had on whether tax cuts promote economic growth. A 65-year study was conducted by the Congressional Research Service, which is a nonpartisan government office, published about 5 years ago. Over 65 years, the study found that top tax rates are not associated with saving, investment, or productivity growth. And the study found that cutting capital gains taxes and top marginal tax rates leads to more wealth inequality. And that's obvious. Why wouldn't that be the case? When rich people are given tax breaks, they mostly pocket the money because they don't need the money. The money doesn't trickle down and get spread through the economy in this way that a lot of right-wingers, supply-siders like to tell us. In the 1950s, when the top marginal tax rate was above 90%, both real GDP and real per capita GDP were growing twice as fast as they are today, when the top marginal tax rate was is 35%. Since 1945, the average tax rate paid by the top 10th of 1% of the wealthiest people has fallen from 50 to 25%. And during that time, their share of income, their portion of all income earned in the United States, rose almost 3 times, from just over 4% to just over 12%. This means what? When you cut rich people's taxes, not only do they pay less in taxes, they're able to start earning much more, and wealth inequality gets even worse. This next image shows the tax rates of the top 0.1% and 0.01%. They decreased drastically from 1945 to 2009, and compare that to this next image of how their share of total income changed. Hint, it went up significantly. By the way, this also debunks the right-wing talking point that taxes are higher than ever. So Donald Trump's proposed cuts will appeal to supply-siders. It will maybe earn him the points he needs with many Republicans, although not all. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. Certainly with his friends and his financial backers. But keep in mind, and I know that the committed Trumpist doesn't give a flying you-know-what about the facts, history tells us that cutting taxes doesn't mean more income for Americans in general. It means that the rich will get a bigger share of total income. And this is all happening while Donald Trump continues to propose cutting crucial government programs. Is this the worst tax plan in decades? Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. I'm coming to you today from the Mass Torts Made Perfect conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. Much more after this.